Welcome to the Next Gen Podcast. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Bryson Wright and Alex Winton. They got next, so let's get to the show.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back into the Next Gen Podcast here on the Bluff City Media Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Bryson Wright, and I'm joined by my co-host, Alex Winton. And today, we got a special guest coming on this week. I know we talked about it last week. We're going to have a full draft episode, so we got to get the NBA draft guru himself, Chip Williams, on the show. Welcome to the show. Welcome back. You know, we had you on last year. It was a great show last year, too. So glad to have you back. How are you doing today, Chip?
Good, my guys. I appreciate it. Always good to be on with you both. Huge fans of your work. So anytime's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to it.
For sure. 100%. And then, so just getting straight into it. NBA draft coming up on Thursday. First time we'll have a 2-day draft. That's going to be really cool, I think. But just to start out, I think at the top of the draft, there's just It's one of the years where there's no clear number one necessarily, even a week out. You know what I mean? So who do you have, Chip, going number one? And then I'll open that for Alex, too, if you have any thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, so my top guy on my board is Ron Holland, but it doesn't seem like he is really even in the conversation for one this year for whatever reason. We can probably talk about him a little bit later because it seems like he's probably going to be in the range for the Grizzlies at 9, which is, if you asked me 4 or 5 weeks ago, I would have told you there's no chance. But, I mean, it seems like they're starting to narrow it down to either Donovan Clingan or Zachary Ricochet, the French wing. So, I mean, I understand it if that's what they do. This draft is kind of, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? Like there's no clear cut, hey, this is Zion, this is Cade, this is Wemby. These guys have to go number one regardless, right? That this is the one time you can somewhat take fit and team context into your calculation for the number one pick because it's just not an obvious clear talent that has to go one, right? So, like, if they go with Donovan Clingan, I get it. Like, I see the two-man game with Trey, and that makes a ton of sense to me. If they go with Ricochet and they really believe in, like, the creation and the shooting, which I'm a little lower on, but if they believe in it, sure, go for it. I see that too. So, yeah, it's fascinating. Like, I don't know that we've been a week out or less from the draft now, and we have no idea who's going to go number one. Genuinely, like, no idea.
Yeah. I probably, I won't say I don't have Holland one. I think probably I still like Sarr, but I have been big on like Holland, like going like top 6. Like I've been big on like there's no reason he should be falling like to like the middle of the first round. It feels like the last couple of years where you have like, even though it was a different situation, like where a Maxey falls or like a Cam Whitmore falls, where they were like lottery talents before the season, and then for whatever reason, as the season goes on, they fall for what reason. And for me, like Ron Holland, I feel like there's no real reason he should be falling. Like you said, if he falls to like the 9, like I think they should take him for sure. Like I think he's like I'm that high on him. I think a team that like really should take him is Charlotte, but I don't know what Charlotte wants to do. But like in terms for me, like I think, like you said, it's probably going to be Richardson or Clingan. I know obviously Grizz fans don't like that because everybody wants Clingan. Or there's been so many rumors about Clingan going to Memphis. But I mean, I like Sarr more so for them, like number one at Atlanta, just because I think you can just what he does upside wise. Like I think in a couple years, like he's raw, like he's a raw prospect. But I think in like 3, maybe 4 years, I could see him being a guy where he could be a all defensive type of guy. Maybe a double guy. Not somebody crazy like getting 20 and 10, but more so just does I won't say Evan Mobley type stuff, but stuff like that I could see. But like you said, in this draft, it's not like clear. Like you said, it could be a fit thing where somebody likes how a guy fits like a Clingan better because again, like even though he doesn't have the same type of athleticism or he's the same mover, he's been more productive, obviously, in terms of where he was at UConn. And his fit anywhere with most teams that need a big is going to be like plug and play. In Atlanta, depending on what they want to do, depending like, hey, if they're wanting to keep Trey, because that's a big thing too. They want to keep Trey, keep DeJounte. they might, they're going to try to win. So they want to get somebody that can be a plug and play versus a SAR where he might be more of a project. You got to wait. So, I think that I'd probably go SAR still just because I like the upside out of him. Like if he hits, I think he's probably at least worst top 3. But again, you could say that for a lot of guys. Like I could see that for like I'm not high, but I'm bigger. I like Reed Shepard. That's another dude. Castle's another guy. Like those guys, I feel like if they improve some things, they could be high end guys. But yeah, like it's not clear in this draft. It's I've been saying it's random since the draft lottery. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. Because we can say all this and it could end up being like, I don't know, like a name that we not even expect. Like I wouldn't be surprised at this point. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think in that people have kind of compared it to like 2013 with the whole Anthony Bennett stuff. I don't think that it's necessarily to that level in terms of it being like a bad draft. I know there's kind of like, there's this perception that this is a bad draft, which I'll say I don't really agree with. I agree with the whole thing, kind of like what you said, opening up, Chip. There's not like the number one clear top guy, but I think there's a lot of teams that if you're in like the situation the Grizzlies are in right now, where you know who your main 2 or 3 guys are going to be, and you're kind of trying to look for people to build off of that. I think there's a lot of good names, whether the Grizzlies decide they want to trade up or if they stay at 9, trade back. Like I think that does give them a lot of options. So it might not be like a top-heavy draft, but I do think this draft is actually pretty deep, regardless of who goes like number 1. And kind of like you guys said, there's a lot of people that could go number 1. I probably would take Sarr if I was the Hawks, but I mean, Ron Holland has been a guy I've been talking about that I have been hoping will fall to 9 as well. So even if he doesn't go number 1, I'm 100% with you. I feel like the defensive upside and all that is there. And if the jumper, kind of develops, I mean, he could be like a great plug and play wing and even more if the offensive stuff is there. Like the defense is 100% there. And I think he's going to be a great defender regardless. But if the offense kind of translates, he could be one of those guys that you look up in 4 or 5 years and you're like, how did he fall to number 9? So, but yeah, I did want to ask you, Chip, what do you think about kind of the perception that this draft is weak as well?
Yeah, I think it all just stems from kind of what you were saying, the fact that there's not Wemby, there's not Zion, there's not Cade Cunningham, there's not whoever, right? Like, we haven't been like even next year, Cooper Flagg, right? Like everyone is super excited for Cooper Flagg to get to Duke in this 2025 draft. There's just not that guy this year. And so when that happens, automatically we're going to say, okay, this is a weak draft. I get that. I think what people really mean is there's no franchise changer. There's no guy that you feel will be the number 1 guy on a title team, right? But something I just did is I put together a top 20 board for a different pod I was on a couple days ago with Daniel Greer. And I had a very hard time leaving several guys off. Like I could have probably made it 35 or 40 and felt pretty good about the same level of guys that I had 18, 19, 20, So I think like if you need a guy like the Grizzlies do in this draft, it's a great draft to go get a guy, like whether that be a high-level bench player, a lower-end starter who maybe could develop into like your 4th or 5th starter. I think all that stuff is there, and I think you could probably find those guys well into the 20s in this draft. So I think you're doing it a disservice when people just say, yeah, this draft's no good. Like, don't even do your homework. Don't worry about it, because it's just not fair. There's a lot of really good players that I like a lot in this draft.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm big on that too. Like for me, it's like when people automatically look, like you said, look at a draft and it doesn't have star talent, they think it's just bad. But like for me, I've always been like that. I even said that, and I think what was it, the year that everybody thought it was bad? I think it was 2020. I think the Bane draft. Yeah, everybody was like, basically like, there's no real clear number 1. I mean, there obviously were some top prospects like Anthony Edwards. You had LaMelo Ball. You had James Wiseman, but like people were like, there was not a lot of star talent. Now you look back now. The top 5 outside of, I think Bane has made an all-star team, and we all know that Bane's an all-star level player. Like, or not top 5, but like you can name 5 guys that are like all-star level players or max contract guys. So, and again, I don't know if it's gonna happen with this draft, but like for me, this draft more so, like you said, there's a lot of players that I can see being like really good role players off the rip. I'm trying to think of one right now. Tristan Da Silva, I'm big on him. There's another guy. I mean, even Clingan, like those guys, I think are like very plug and play guys. Dalton Connect, another one. Like I think those guys are very plug and play guys. Where especially like you said, both of y'all said for the Grizzlies, like that's what they need because the Grizzlies have their core established. Obviously, you have your three at the top, and then hopefully, again, if some people, depending on how you feel about Gigi, depending on what he can become, either way, they have a foundation of guys that you already know. Like at least going into next year, I would say probably got at least 7 guys foundationally that they have. Now they're trying to find probably like 2 or 3 more that they can add to not only to be rotation players in the regular season, but really in the playoffs, because that's really what they're trying to get to. So any guy that can come in right away and plug and play, I think is going to be beneficial to them. And like you said, there's a lot of guys like for the Grizzlies at 9, I'm not going to say who they could take, but like for most players, whoever they take, I'm not going to say it could be a reach, but for like you could look at it and I won't say you could talk yourself into it depending, because the draft, like you said, is so close that they might take somebody that's that Mox had like at, I don't know, like 20, like 20 at 9. And then, they might get looked at a different way, but probably won't, just because in this draft, it's so all over the place. And I mean, they've done that in the past before, obviously. Like I think they did that with Roddy, where I think he was like for some people in the second round, and then they took him like first round. Obviously Zaire, I think he was a lottery talent, but like there was and then there's a couple other guys that they've taken where you look at it like they may take a little higher, but they don't really care about that. They go by their board or their draft board, in their process. So I do feel good about that. And I feel like there's a lot of older guys too that have a track record of producing, which helps the Grizzlies out, because you kind of know they can come in right away. This is what they're probably good at, and they can fit into what you already have going on. Whereas, you get a project, it's kind of like, it's like a mystery box because you don't know what they're going to be. So I do feel good about that because there's a lot of players like that. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why I think we've kind of talked about the whole trading up thing, which we'll get your kind of thoughts on it too, with some new information coming about if the Grizzlies would trade up. I think everybody kind of assumes that if the Grizzlies do decide to trade up, it would be for Clingan. I think that's kind of what the consensus has been. But as we've said, it kind of seems like, Clingan could end up going number 1. And if they do trade up, like I don't think they're going to end up trading up to number 1. So I feel like even if they do stay at 9, I feel like staying at 9 at this point will probably be the most likely thing they do. But they do have like that track record of in the past they've traded up the last 4 or 5 years. So it's still very up in the air. But I did want to say, so if the Grizzlies do decide to trade up, which pick do you think would be most likely for them to trade up to? Do you think they'll try to get up to like 3, maybe 5 or 6? Or like what kind of stuff have you been hearing on that?
Yeah, it seems like that Houston at 3 is at least open for business for that pick. I get the sense, just from other people reporting, like they think they're pretty close to being good. And so maybe they want to leverage that number 3 pick to get someone who could actually help them now. And so like immediately your mind goes to like, okay, well, is that going to cost Marcus Smart? Well, Marcus Smart plus 9 for 3 in this draft, it's probably not fair value, right? So then you're going to have, and they can't just take Smart's contract. And then it starts to get complicated, right? Like, all right, well, who are the Grizzlies taking back? Do they want to part with Tari Eason? Dylan Brooks's contract matches up perfectly with Smart. That's probably not happening, right? Like, it just gets kind of complicated, The other one I've kind of been interested in is Charlotte at 6. That's obviously wouldn't cost a ton. Like, I think saw somebody throw out Santi Aldama in 9 for 6. Like that feels like pretty, fair value, right? Like he's a fringe young guy who's showed some good stuff, maybe not as consistent as you want, but Charlotte, they're nowhere near being good enough, right? They've still got a couple more years to rebuild. They got to figure out what, Brandon Miller and LaMelo are going to look like together. They got to figure out what they're doing with Bridges, and they got all kinds of stuff they need to sort out over the next couple of years, right? So, like Santi, taking a shot on him, moving back a couple spots, maybe they get their guy they wanted anyways there. I don't know. I think those 2 picks are really kind of the ones I'm eyeing. That, like, yeah, that makes sense for both of them to be open for business. It's just, can you find something that makes sense for both teams?
Yeah. I'd probably I'm agree with Chip. I think those are really the 2 that I could really see them moving up for. Three, I feel like they could go up there, but like you said, all those details, like it just makes it complicated for me for them to move up to go that high. 6 has probably been the most popular because it's like if Clingan falls to 6, they probably worried about, like a Portland taking him. So like they could want to move up to 6 and like you said, move off some guy or move off Santi and then 9 and to get Clingan right there. That's probably the most popular one, but outside of that, I can't really think of. I know there's been reports about them trading back too. So that's another thing that's interesting. But yeah, I mean, I probably think I've always been pro that just stay where you're at because I feel like in this draft, like we've been talking about, like there's no real big separation, even though you have a need at center. I feel like I've always been big on at least for the Grizzlies at least to get the center that you really need in like free agency or via trade. And then obviously you can draft a center, but I think I'm not gonna say a lot of. I mean, there's a good amount of centers what I feel good about, like in the later rounds or late in the first round, where you could get them as like a 4th string guy, and then you get your starting big, more so in via free agency and trade. So that's kind of where I'm at. But like I feel like they can just stay where they're at, and I feel like they can get a good prospect. Now again, like they might feel like, hey, like we've said, outside of last year, they traded up outside of last year before that, they traded up 3 straight years. So like. They're gonna, if they feel like somebody's worth doing it, they might. Like I have no idea. I'm not in the Grizz the draft rooms. I wish I was because I have a better idea. I'll be like, okay, they're focused on this guy and this and that, but this is random. So but yeah, I mean I think I feel like they'll probably stay pat, but like I wouldn't be surprised if they did trade up to like 6. That's probably the one I probably feel more confident because 3, like you said, it's too much going on. 6 is a lot easier to make it work without giving up too much or having like a 3rd team in there. You can just do it, 2 teams. So I'd probably say that's the one.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. And I think if it is Santi, I think they're more likely to do that. The only thing will be if they move up to 6 is Clingan going to be there? Are they going to try to take a big, or are they going to go another route? Because, I mean, we know that they're still high on a lot of wings or taller guards like Connect. Devin Carter's another guy that we know they're very high on. And then talking about his dad being on the coaching staff or being close to the team and everything. So that's somebody that they've been high on as well. So I think there are a lot of options, even if they do trade up to 6. But if they stay at 9, I mean, I think I've kind of been talking about it, and we know, Chip, that you've already said Ron Holland is your number 1 prospect. That's somebody that we've kind of been talking about. We think that if he does fall to 9, and I think I was looking at the Ringers mock draft today, and Kevin O'Connor actually had that being the pick at 9 for the Grizzlies was Ron Holland. So what would you like to say about his game and kind of what he would be like if the Grizzlies did take him?
Yeah, I mean, I think for starters, just Ron Holland is a freaking dog, man. Like I heard someone call him, he's a basketball sicko in the best way possible. Like he just cares about getting the ball more than you do. And he's a better athlete than you are. And I kind of think he hates the guy he's guarding. Like, you know what I mean? He's just kind of wired a little bit different, but in the best way possible. Like
Vince.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Like Vince is wired different. So.
Exactly. Grizzlies like those guys. I think they're willing to take swings on guys like that. And I know everyone's very concerned about the shot, right? But this guy shot over 70% from the foul line, which is always a solid indicator. Like, okay, it's not broken, right? Like the touch is fine and the shot's not broken. Like, I think one thing we've maybe lost a little perspective on is when this guy was at Duncanville in Texas, when this guy was on, AAU circuits, he was a power forward, right? He's basically a play finisher on offense. All of a sudden, he goes to a very poorly constructed Ignite team, maybe the worst constructed Ignite team I've seen since they've had the program there. And he is this super high usage, the only guy who can really get his own shot consistently. He's being asked to just carry a burden that he's not going to be asked to carry in the NBA. So I think we expect these guys to be superhuman and just never get tired and all that stuff. Well, that does factor into your jumper, right? If you're having to be the guy on defense and also carry the creation burden on offense, you just maybe don't have the wind to hit a standstill jumper like you normally would if you're playing a little bit more reduced role on offense, right? But I think some of the passing stuff is kind of good. I think obviously the finishing and transition is amazing. He can play on, off ball defense. Like, I just, I hate the comparison stuff, but just for people who haven't seen him play, and that it makes sense, right? Like, just not a lot of people watch a lot of G League Ignite, and I understand. But like a high end outcome for him is probably something like Jaylen Brown, right? Not saying that's who he is or who he's going to be, but like play style, like the way Jaylen Brown played at Cal, it does remind you of what Ron Holland looks like at a similar age. So that's why I'm really high on that guy. Because I think if he hits, he's going to really hit.
Yeah, I agree with that, because that's the thing too. Like, people don't, like, the context is missing. Like you said, the team that they had was not that great, and even in that, he was still averaging, like, in the regular season, I'm looking at least, he was averaging like 21 points, 7 rebounds on 3 assists, and almost 3 steals. Like, he was still doing a lot of different things, and I don't think that, like, people just scoff at that, like, and don't really, like, he was still doing all that in spite of, like you said, not really having to be the creator too, like, he wasn't a creator beforehand. So, like, you have to then put it in the context, like, he's not, like you said, not going to be in that role, at least right away. Like, he's going to be able to build that, especially in the right situation, like, especially in Memphis, where he's going to be like a role player where he could just focus on probably like running in transition, maybe corner threes, and that's really it, being a play finisher while doing the little stuff and maybe creating, off of closeouts and stuff like that. But nothing really too crazy where they're asking him to run a whole offense, and he'll be able to get to develop and stuff like that. And not only that, but there's other teams too. That's why I like Charlotte, because I think he could be a guy where defensively he could play next to LaMelo. Obviously Brandon Miller, like, I like that fit. But yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you, Chip. I'm big on Holland. Like I said, I think he should be I don't think he should fall past 6. Like, I really don't think that. Like, I look at this draft, like I said, there's not a lot of guys that I'm super high on, but like, he's one of those guys where, like you said, if he gets a jumper like high end, he's probably a top 5 in a redraft, like 4 years down the line. Like, so I feel the same way, like, about a Castle, higher on Shepherd, but like, those are guys where I feel like they just got a couple little things, and if they figure it out, I wouldn't be surprised in like 4 years where it's like, oh, why did he fall like 12 or 13 or something like that? So yeah, no, I definitely agree.
I think one thing to your point, Alex, too, just to like add some context to the numbers you just threw out, I think sometimes we lose perspective that the G League is better than any NCAA conference, right? The best NCAA conference is not as good as the G League. So he put up those numbers playing against grown men who are already professional basketball players. Like, that, we should not take that for granted. What he did was pretty incredible this year.
Yeah, and you got to keep in mind, he's also, on some of those nights, he's playing against, people that were first-round picks in past years as well. Yep. Whether it's, we looked at it at the Grizzlies. I mean, G.G. Jackson was playing in the G League for the first half of the season, and he finished the season and made second-team All-Rookie. So it's one of those things where it's not like he was playing against high-level competition. And I think because of how the three-point shooting has changed basketball, obviously that has become, like, I feel like if it's before Steph, he's probably looked at as a higher pick just because the three-point shooting doesn't seem as important. But I'll always say, like, you can teach, or you can get better at shooting. Like, you can't teach athleticism. You can't teach that, like, innate ability to find the ball. Like that, like, he has all the stuff that you feel like you can't really teach people. And I think that's one of the things where it's like, and I think he also, like, when you see somebody that has that tenacity on defense, it makes me think that, like, he's going to be in the gym. He's going to want to get better with his jumper. Like, if you continue, it's hard for me to believe that if you're, practicing, working out every day, you're not going to at least get somewhat better, from behind the arc. And like you said, with the free throw shooting, it's shown that it's not like his jumper's just completely broken. And I still think he shot like 27, 28% from 3, which obviously isn't good, but it's not a super large sample size. Their season isn't as long. Maybe he just went on a slump, stuff like that. We have seen great shooters have slumps. So I think that that's something that can come around. But when you have somebody that has everything else, I think that sometimes you can kind of give up on if their shooting isn't as great right now, just because it can, like, it's something he can develop. Another guy I did want to talk about, obviously, I've been saying it, I'm a big Tennessee fan. I think Dalton Connect is a very good option at 9. Also because there have been rumors about if the Grizzlies do decide that they want to move on from Luke Kennard. and they try to, they opt into his team option and then try to trade him, which is something that we've seen. Might be a draft day trade, could be something later. So not 100% sure what they'll do with that. But I think if Luke Kennard does get traded, if you want to find somebody that, I'm not going to say he's going to come in and shoot 45% from three, but somebody that can replace his minutes and be a high-end, catch and shoot guy. But I think he also will have a little bit more off the dribble than Luke does. I think, he's a little bit taller. He's a little bit more athletic. I think he's a better finisher around the rim. I think he's going to be able to finish through contact and stuff. Whereas Luke was basically, he's going to be a catch and shoot guy. He might do a little bit of playmaking. But if you're talking about somebody who's going to be just like a pure scorer and, somebody who can come off and be like a 6th man of the year candidate, maybe not in year 1, but year 2 or 3, I feel like that's the kind of player Dalton Knecht is, because, he's already a little bit older. So maybe not as much in terms of development there, but I think that right now he's a high end scorer, and I do think that the spacing in the NBA is going to make him a lot better as well.
Yeah, absolutely agree there. I think he's got a pretty obvious role at the next level, and I think some people have kind of pegged him as like a shooter, right? And you watched him a ton at Tennessee. Like, he's so much more than that. He really is a scorer who can shoot. He can attack closeouts. I think you can put him in like some second side pick and roll stuff, and he can create his own shot. He can get all the way to the rim. Obviously, we saw the combine numbers, like really impressive stuff. The age is the most concerning thing, right? If you go back and look at the history of guys that were his age drafted in the lottery, there's just not a lot of it doesn't give you a ton of hope, right? It's pretty rare that a guy his age comes in and develops into like a high level starter or a star or anything like that. But I think if your expectation, like you said, is like a 6th man, maybe he's good enough to be like a 5th starter or something like that, which is exactly what the Grizzlies are looking for. And he has the number 1 skill that they probably need more of, which is shooting. Then he makes a ton of sense. I've joked a couple times. I call him the 3rd Bogdanovich. Like, he's going to be the 3rd Bogdanovich to come in the league. So I think if his name was Dalton Bogdanovich and he was from Serbia, then like we'd all be really high on him. But he's Dalton Knecht from Tennessee. So
yeah, no, I've been look. Bryson can say it. I said this. I can't remember. It was a couple weeks ago. I've been saying best case scenario for him, or one of his high end outcomes, is Bogdanovich from Atlanta. Like, I've been saying, like, that's what I see when I watch him. I'm like, I think like he could be that for a team. Now, like you said, older, so that might be a problem. But I really feel like I wouldn't be surprised if he's like that type of player. Because again, like you said, people just look at the shooting and think like that's all he can do. But if you really go look at it, he's doing a little bit of secondary creation. He's actually attacking the rim. He's got some athleticism. Like, he had some posters at Tennessee. Like, he was actually dunking on some people. Like, so like you got to think like in a better context where he's not the 1st or 2nd option, even 3rd. He's playing next off of stars. He's probably going to look a lot better, and those numbers probably going to stay around the same. And big thing for me is with him and is he rebounds a little bit. Like, I think he averaged like before at, I think it was in North Colorado, I think he averaged like 7 rebounds, and then this year he averaged like 5. So, and for the Grizzlies at least, they need more positional rebounding, especially when, obviously I think Jaren can be a better rebounder, but even then, if Jaren is a better rebounder, you still need more rebounding in every other position. And especially when we're seeing the league how it is now, you just need guys. You can't have guys that can't rebound. Like, it's hard to sustain that. So getting that at the wing spot too, I think is a big plus, especially for this team. That really in the past has thrived off of second chance opportunities and things of that nature. So I'm big on Knecht, but like you said, it's again, some people might look at him because of the age where it's like you don't want to take him in the lottery. And obviously I'm not saying they're the same player, but there's another player in this draft, I think, who's a Baylor Shireman's in this draft. Like, he's more of a, like, he's another guy where he's a guy that, he hits a lot of shots. He's a 3-point shooter, rebounds, but he's more of a late, first guy. Versus where Knecht, he's a higher end guy. Now, again, I kind of understand that, obviously. But who's to say they might look at him and be like, hey, like, well, we could just trade down and we can, get a guy that can serve that same value. for less money or whatever the case may be. But no, I'm high on Knet. Obviously, I think any team that takes him in the lottery is getting a really solid player. But again, it all just depends on your team, because like, are you a team that's going to be trying to win right away, or are you a team that's going to have time to develop? Because if you have a team time to develop, they're just going to take the project. They're just going to take the guy with more upside. But if you're a team like the Grizzlies, they'll do it. So that's why it's interesting to see, because when you look at those teams in the lottery, at least, I mean, again, he could go to San Antonio, but who knows how fast they're trying to really trying to win games. And then obviously, you could say OKC's another one. Obviously, that's another pit. Sacramento, like those type of teams are probably teams you look at and be like, they're trying to win games right away, so they make more sense for him. But yeah, I mean, I think he's got a role regardless. Like, I really feel good about where he's going to be. I'd be surprised if he's not like a really, at least at worst, like a rotation player. Like, I feel really surprised if he's not like he's out the league in like 4 years. I just can't see it. It's hard for me to see it.
Yeah, and he's also a guy that is like kind of similar to what I said about Holland, but I know like for a fact Dalton Knecht is the type of dude that after a 30-point game, he was, back in the gym that same night putting up more shots. So it's like that same thing where I think he's going to have that work ethic. And I think if he gets in the gym with, Bane or somebody like that, who's also kind of that same way, who they stay in the gym, I mean, those shooting competitions are going to be even better next year. I mean, they talk about them already if they do draft them. So that, yeah, I think that he's the type of dude that, look, I want to see him being out of the league in a couple of years. I think he's the type of dude that he's at, like, maybe not super high ceiling, but a really high floor as well. Like, you plug and play, you put him in. At worst case scenario, he's a guy that's going to come in and be a top tier spot up shooter. And then if all the other stuff translates, you have a real six man. And I think that's kind of what I see for him and kind of see for his career. And kind of like you said, Chip, maybe like the fifth starter. That's kind of what I see for him. But I also wanted to, talk about some other guys, because the center position obviously has been a big thing for the Grizzlies. So let's say Clingan goes in the top 8, the Grizzlies don't trade up. Who are the centers that you're looking at if they did stay at 9?
Yeah, I mean, we can just probably talk about the, I don't know, one of the most controversial or at least polarizing. There's nothing controversial about this guy, but the most polarizing prospect, Zach Edey, right?
Yeah.
So I think myself and a lot of other people were pretty quick to dismiss, hey, look, this is just another kind of gimmicky thing. This guy's dominating a bunch of small college players. There's no chance this stuff's going to work. The NBA doesn't do post-ups. We have figured out how to play basketball a more efficient way, and it's not dump it to the big guy 30 times a game, right? There's just no teams that do that. But I think when I took a step back and I realized, like, okay, instead of focusing on maybe what he can't do, what is it that Zach Edey does well and can do well at the next level? I think obviously he's a monster on the rebounds, right? On both offensively and defensively, just because of his size, his wingspan, and he's basically impossible to root out of his spot. He's going to be able to grab a lot of rebounds. So you feel good about that. Feel good about him being a screen setter, again, because he's a monster and it's hard to get around him. And he was a very good screen setter at Purdue, easily the best screen setter in this class. Probably one of the best screen setters I've seen in my entire time watching prospects. And then I think the third thing that's super interesting is he played very heavy minutes, especially for someone his size. He didn't really tire down. He didn't get into a ton of foul trouble. He was able to just stay on the floor. And for a guy that size, who's obviously, going to be targeted to put in pick and rolls, and they're going to try everything to get him involved defensively, to get him in foul trouble and generally just to wear him down. Neither one of those things seemed to really affect him in college. So just those three things right there make me think, okay, that's at least a role player in the NBA, because, again, there's just not many guys his size, and he's able to do all this stuff. Then you add the fact that, all right, let's say he goes up against a team that's going to be switching. Well, good luck switching anyone onto him that's under 6'10". It's an automatic 2. He's going to do exactly what he did in college, which is just take him down to the post and get a very easy look. I think a big swing skill for him, though, is when something like that happens and they bring the double, he's gonna have to pass, right? Like Jaren is finally starting to do some of that. It took him 6 years, and Jaren was, more than 3 years younger than Edey was coming into the league. So he's got to learn to pass pretty quickly. Otherwise, teams are going to realize they can just run doubles at him, and he's going to get lost. But I think if he does learn that, then it's very possible that he's a starter in the NBA and probably a pretty good starter in the NBA. I've currently got him 13 on my board, and I'm really struggling with exactly where to put him. So anyways, I've spent a lot of time on Edey. I'll give you a couple more guys I really like. One guy I actually have higher than him, I have him in my top 10, is Day'Ron Holmes from Dayton. Just guy's been on draft radars for a couple of years now, kept going back to Dayton, did nothing but dominate at Dayton. I mean, he dunks everything. He can put the ball on the floor. He protects the rim, moves really well. Just all the stuff you want out of a modern big, you get it in Day'Ron Holmes. I keep seeing him mocked in the 20s, sometimes even the second round. I'll just believe all that stuff when I see it. This guy's going to go top 20. Someone's going to take him high because he's really freaking good. And I think teams are a lot smarter now than they were, 10, 15 years ago, sometimes when guys like that would slip. Last one I'll just kind of throw out there, a guy I didn't really expect to be as high on, but the tape's really good and the stats are really good. That's Kyle Filipowski. I think he's a legitimate dribble, pass, shoot guy at a real 6'11", probably 7 feet with shoes on. I know he doesn't have the best wingspan, and it may be hard for him to play center, but he plays his freaking butt off. I think the shot's good. He can create for himself a little bit. Pretty good rebounder. Probably not going to be the best defender. I have some questions about whether he can stay on the floor long term in the playoffs, but just all the stuff is there for a guy his size that make me think, yeah, I'm very comfortable drafting that guy in the top 20 and just seeing what we have. There's a few more guys you can talk about. Kel'el Ware, Yves Missi from Baylor, Adem Bona from UCLA. It's actually a really good year for the Grizzlies to need a center. And even if they miss out, like we talked about, they miss out on Sarr, they miss out on Clingan. There's a lot of really interesting guys that they could either stay at 9 and take and feel pretty good about, or they could trade back into the teens or 20s or trade up. They could, use a future asset to go get a second first-round pick and grab one of these guys and feel pretty good about it.
Yeah. I've been with Zach Edey is kind of like the thing with him is I was because I have some friends that I'm in other group chats and stuff like that are very high on Zach Edey. They put him top 10 and this and that. And I'm look, I don't see him as a top 5 prospect, but I don't see him lower than 20 or 15. I think
right.
For me, how I look at Zach Edey is best case scenario, he becomes a bigger Zubac, Visa Zubac. That's what I think his role is. Like you said, he has touch. It's not he has legit skill and touch. And like you said, if you try to switch on him, throwing something a small, he's gonna win that. The thing with him, like you said, is they're gonna try to put him in space. That's my issue with also Clingan to some extent. But with Clingan, I feel better about his defense, just his IQ and reads and stuff like that. But like you said, Edey's been, shown he's been more and more conditioned. And the biggest thing, like you said, for me, which I feel just for the Grizzlies in general, what they need is the passing. Where we saw, especially in the playoffs, you got to be able to make them reads out of either doubles or in the short roll, especially in the short roll. That's where Derek Lively was living off of in the short roll, and even the Boston Celtics. But obviously with Boston, they're different, where they had Drew Holiday playing out the short roll, and then had basically Al Horford and everybody else space. But point is, you got to be able to make those process decisions, especially when you get 2 on the ball, because with the Grizzlies, Ja Morant in the playoffs, as we've seen, is going to get 2 players on the ball. So you're going to have to be able to make those reads and make shots. That's understood, because he's such a presence that they're going to have to do that. So you need guys that are going to be able to make that decision, whether they're at the elbow or in the post. Like you said, with Jaren, he's starting to do that, which is good. But I feel like that other big that's going to play next to him or without him needs to be able to do that. So that's kind of where with Edey, even if they would take him, I'd much rather like him off, like you said, a rotation big. Whereas I think the only one I feel really good about in terms of the bigs in the class, that could start right away, is Clingan, because his passing has shown that where he could make those reads. But no, there's a lot of good names. Like you said, Kel'el Ware is another one where Grizzly fans are I've seen people talk about him. I think even I forgot who it was talking about him, but like he's a really good like prospect because he has upside. He's an athletic big, and he has some touch. Like he could really shoot the ball potentially. So, but again, some people question like the competition he played against, stuff like that. The big from Baylor is another one that I liked. Holmes is another one. I think Bryson, that was his guy, Holmes. Like he's been talking about him for a while. I like Holmes. I think, like you said, I think he's going to go like first round. I don't know why people saying he's not going to go first. Like, because apparently he got like, well, obviously this is just rumors, all these rumors, but apparently he got a promise. Hard for me to see him fall past a team like, I don't know, I forgot what Denver's picking, but like hard for me to see him fall past like a team like that who needs a big like that could play those type of minutes. But I think this is a really good class. Edey, I think, is a really solid player. I like to joke on Edey just because of my friends and how they look at him, but I think he's going to be a decent player. Like it's always jokes. I think he's going to be a decent player. I just think for the Grizzlies in their spot, if they take him at 9, I feel more comfortable with them trading back and getting one of the other bigs, because I think you could possibly get more assets, or you could possibly, depend on it. It just depends on what the deal is, like, because they could get more assets out of it. But I wouldn't be mad at a lot of these bigs. Like you said, this is a solid class to where they got a lot of options. But for me, most of them I feel like more rotation big, which is fine. You need rotation bigs too, because again, obviously we love BC, but BC's coming off an Achilles injury. He's going to have maintenance games where he's not going to be able to play. We already know that. And then depending on what they do, like let's say they trade for, I don't know, like I know obviously with Luke, they trade for like a Wendell Carter. Love Wendell Carter. People know I love Wendell Carter, but he misses games. He's only playing like 55 games per season. So when those guys miss, you're going to need somebody to step in, which is why I think they're going to add 2 bigs because, and maybe even Jaren, they're going to need guys to step in when those guys are resting or having those rest days. So I think they could, that's why I think they will draft a big, or they might trade back in. But there's a lot of good options where they could basically be plug and play in the regular season at least. So this is a good draft, like a really, really good draft for that.
Yeah, and like kind of like Alex said, I'm glad you said Deron Holmes, because Deron Holmes was one of the guys that like early on, like in the draft stuff, or really just like, but even before March Madness, like going into
I would say before. Like, you was talking about him like January, boy, like February, something like that. It was a while
ago. He was just one of those guys where, you know how sometimes you just end up watching a random game. I ended up watching a random Dayton game, and he just. Like, I don't even remember how I ended up watching this game, but I turned it on and he was just dominant. I think he had like 30 points, 10 boards, stuff like that. So, and I was just like, okay. And then I kind of looked into like the draft stuff, and kind of like you said, I saw some people saying he was a second rounder. And then, I went and looked at the stats, and I was like, I mean, he's been dominant. Like, he's been averaging 20 a game. He rebounds. Not to say he's going to be like a high level shooter, but he can make a jumper. And I think that's something like, I just feel like he's going to end up going higher than a lot of people expect. And I'm pretty sure he got a green room invite. So, that tells me, like if you get a green room invite, I think they did give out a few more this year than they usually do, just because you're not really sure.
Like 25 feels like a thing.
Yeah.
20,
so like obviously they gave out more of them just because, and that kind of shows you what kind of draft it is. Like you don't really know, but if you're getting a green room invite, that means that you're most likely going to be a first round pick at the worst. And I would be surprised to see him, go anywhere after that, like in the 20s. I feel like he's probably going to be late lottery, maybe 16, 17. And I think that is a guy where if the Grizzlies do trade back, if they trade back and he's still there at 16, 17, that would be an awesome scenario. I do really like Ware as well. I think Ware is a pretty good candidate for being taken at 9, just because he does have that added ability of, there's still questions on how his shooting will translate. That's kind of for any big, but we know what his shooting was in college, and that, he was a pretty good shooter. Not on, a lot of attempts a game, but when he did shoot it, he usually made it. So that's the good thing. Whereas if you look at a guy like Edey, it's more kind of up in the air. It's one of those things where, okay, yeah, he shot well at the combine, but, he's wide open, shot. It's different.
Same with Clingan too, because I remember the people talking about Clingan shooting threes. I was like you said, like it's open gym, like it's way different.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, it's definitely different. Like there's a lot of people that look awesome in the open gym. You know what I mean? So if if somebody drafts Edey and he goes to summer league and he starts making threes, okay, then I'll believe it. I was wrong. Sorry. Right. But like that's what those like Clingan and Edey are both like you're gonna have to show me in games that you can shoot. Whereas I think Ware and Holmes have shown in the past that they can do it. And even if when it comes to Edey, I think the main thing for him is like you say, like getting to the short roll and playmaking out of there. And then also if he can, get maybe like just a mid-range jumper, not even a three-pointer, I think that'll just expand his game a lot more just because it's so hard to guard him on the interior. And regardless of like what you think about him, he's definitely polarizing, there's no question about that. But I think he's a guy that's going to come in, he's going to rebound. I think he could struggle like in the pick and roll when people attack him and stuff like that in the NBA a little bit more than he did in college, just because they're going to have more dynamic ball handlers, guys that are better at finishing through contact and stuff like that. But I mean, this is still a dude that when you're still going to have to score over 7-4. You know what I mean? It's not easy to do that. And there's not a lot of guys taller than him, or there might only be really, it's just Wemby and then Boban is, but he doesn't really play.
Maybe Porzingis is like 7'3", but that's about it. I can't think of anybody else like that's like that tall.
Yeah, and then Bol doesn't really play.
7'3", because was Edey 7'4"? Or am I
Edey's measured basically 7'4". So
7'4",
I think
yeah.
So and it's like legit 7'4". Like he got measured 7'4" at the combine, not the fake 7'4" that they put on the college. They be like
7'11" wingspan too. Like he's huge, man. He's huge.
Wow. That's
so and like we were saying, for Ron Holland, he's a really good free throw shooter. So that is one thing that does point to like, okay, maybe the shooting can kind of translate a little bit. Maybe he will be able to develop a shot just because he's not a horrible free throw shooter. And also, it's good. It's a good thing that if you do put him in, they're not going to be able to do the hack-a-shack on Zach Edey, because if you do that, I mean, if he's shooting 80%, hey, you know what? Foul him. I'll take those. I'll take that every time. But yeah, I do think it's really a deep class for the bigs, and I think that is a good thing for the Grizzlies. But that kind of goes into like what I wanted to talk about next. We talked about if they trade up, who are some other players that if they do trade back, whether that's the teens, whether that's the 20s, who's high on your board, or who's in that range on your board that you think kind of fit the Grizzlies draft profile?
I mean, definitely a guy would have been Devin Carter. It seems like he's just going to go like top 10 at this point. I'm a huge fan. And obviously, his dad's on the staff and all that stuff. A little overlap with Marcus Smart. So like the fit, is kind of weird, but he was definitely a guy I was very interested in. A guy that I think the Grizzlies have at least some level of interest in is Johnny Furphy from Kansas. He's another one that I wasn't sure how I felt about him until I really went and watched. And like, I'm always impressed by guys who just try hard. Like, I know that seems so simple, but like, there's so many guys who are just so talented that they don't really have to try that hard and they're still really good, right? Johnny Furphy's really good, and he is working like crazy on both ends of the floor. Like, he's running off screens on offense. He's fighting for every rebound. He's defending like crazy. I don't think he has the best like lateral mobility to be a great defender, but I know he's going to at least try, right? And that counts for something. And I think he's a pretty decent movement shooter. Like, he's got really good size. I could see him as like if they decide like, hey, we're going to trade Luke Kennard and figure out the center situation that way. Like, Furphy's obviously not going to come in year one and be what Luke Kennard is, but down the line, you've at least got a succession plan there. One more guy is Tyler Smith, who played with Matas Buzelis and Ron Holland with the G League Ignite. Kind of like again, I always say I hate doing comparisons, and then I come on here and I throw out a bunch of comparisons. So just take these for what they're worth, right? Like, I'm not saying this is who these guys are, but like Channing Frye or something like that, like this big power forward, like 6'10 plus, who like can really shoot the ball. He's a lefty. Lefties, when they shoot, it always looks great. So he's kind of got that going for him. Rebounds a little bit, like not amazing at the big man stuff, kind of a shooter specialist. But like when you're talking about a team that's got three pretty high level creators, you want to just add as much spacing and keep the floor as open for them as possible. I think Tyler Smith could really do that. A little bit of a project, but I think he could give you some minutes early on if you really needed him to. So those two guys definitely come to mind immediately. Trying to look and see if there's anyone else. Maybe I could give you one more. No, that's it. I'm going those two. I feel good about those two guys.
I was surprised. Okay, there's a lot of I've heard a lot of stuff about Ryan Dunn too. That's somebody that I've thought but he's kind of similar to Holland. Whereas, well, I think his shooting is a little bit worse. Obviously, I think that's the big thing is that he's not a great shooter. But I've seen a lot of people saying that he's might be the best defender in the draft and kind of like a Herb Jones type of guy. And maybe he's not saying he's going to be first team all defense or anything like that, but he could be. Like, he has the potential. He has like all the measurements and to be that type of guy. So that was another guy I wanted to throw out there too, because I've heard a lot of people talking about him lately too. And he has I think he has like a 7'1" wingspan as well.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of people that I feel like he might go a little bit higher than people are expecting to.
I think that's a great call. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, you're good. I wouldn't be surprised by that. I think you said Furphy because I was a big Furphy fan. Like I said Furphy like earlier this year. Like I was watching Kansas and like he was getting like a lot of buzz because he wasn't playing like a lot at first. Because I remember seeing an article, I can't remember from who it was, but they were talking about him. I was like, okay, who's this? Like, who's his wing? And they were talking about 6'8", can shoot the ball. He does, he can play off the ball. Like you said, he gives effort on both ends. And I was watching him because in Kansas, he didn't have a role at first. And then once he started, you really started to see like he really could play. And then kind of teetered off as the season went on. But I mean, like, I'm big on him just because, again, like, I think he can do a lot. Like, again, like you said, he's not the greatest mover. He's young, but like, I think you could see, like you said, with the Luke Kennard thing, you could see them trade back and get him. Obviously, I think dependent, like the Grizz are so, it's interesting with them because they're the picks that they could get or the people they could get, like you said. I feel like it's all dependent on what they do beforehand. Because like you said with Devin Carter, right? For me with Carter, like you said, the smart overlap. Now, obviously, we already talked about it. Like I think the rumor came out today. They don't want to trade Smart. Now, again, just rumors. But like hypothetically speaking, what if they wanted? Because apparently they've been also tagged to Jared Allen. What if they wanted to trade Jared Allen or trade Smart for Allen? Then Carter would make a lot of sense to take at like 9 or something like that because they would have traded him. Traded Smart, got him back. There wouldn't been no overlap. Same with like with the Kennard, it's like hard for me to see them take like another wing unless they trade him. So like it all depends on like if they trade, if they pack, if they just opt in. Like it's so hard for me, but I do feel like another guy. I don't even know if this is a trade back guy like for me because it seems like he's gonna go lottery is Tristan Da Silva from Colorado. Like I watched him a lot and I'm like he fits a lot of like what the Grizzlies want at like a combo forward spot. Like he's been a college guy for 4 years. He's shown he can shoot the ball, can play. He's shown connectivity like as a wing, where he's not gonna ruin your offense. He can catch and shoot. Defensively, he's not the greatest mover, but he's shown that he could probably be able to switch at times. He's a really high IQ. Like they like those type of guys. So I feel like they could take him, but again, his range is more of like late lottery, mid first, and so he could be anywhere. And it also depends like on the team they trade with, because you look at the teams like that are in the back half of that first round. It's like who would they trade with, right? And what would you be giving up? And like it's hard for me to kind of see it. But like those are some names that I really like. Furphy for sure. Obviously Da Silva. I don't know if there's anybody else back half. Like you said, Tyler Smith's another one. I think that probably Holmes maybe because Holmes might fall in the back end of the first. Like he's another one. So I'd say those are the names, but not too many. I feel like there's a lot of guys that they probably like at the top of the draft. But again, it's just a guess. But I mean, the good thing is a lot of these guys like are really good options. And like I said, like they got at least a track record. Like Da Silva, that's why I like him because he has a track record of being productive. And that's kind of been their formula. When they usually hit on a player, it's because they have a track record of one. Like Brandon Clark was a guy that had a track record of being a productive player. Desmond Bain had a track record of being a productive player. Even Vince Williams did. And those guys are now still here. So like I'm always big on guys that show me have a big sample size of doing something that they can add to the NBA game. So yeah, those are probably the names that I'd probably say, those kind of 2-3 names.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I think if they do trade back, they have a lot of options. This draft is, like I said, like starting off, I feel like it is deeper in that kind of in that aspect of if they do trade back, they can still get a lot of value. But you know, Chip, we're getting close to the end here. I got to ask the last thing. Obviously, the Grizzlies have had some success in the second round as well. You know, Vince Williams Jr., G.G. Jackson. Who are some guys that you think could be that, like G.G. Jackson or Vince Williams or somebody like that? Because the Grizzlies do have 2 second-round picks as of now. We'll see if they try to package those to try to maybe, you know, move up or something like that as well. But, you know, if they do stay where they're at now, who are some guys that you think could be that G.G. Jackson type? Maybe not make it on an all-rookie team, but somebody who can provide a lot of value coming out of the second round.
For sure. I don't know if there's a GG Jackson. That was a like one-of-one crazy case, right? Like we may never see another GG Jackson. I not to go off on a tangent, but I was a little bit. I think I had GG in the 20s somewhere, right? Because at some point I'm like, all right, this is a 6'9" shot creator. You just take this guy in the first round, no matter how much he sucked in college. Like you just try it, right? And when he was there at 45, I was like, whoa, you know, like what? I just can't believe that profile fell into the mid-second round, right? It's not like someone got him in the 30s, literally the middle of the second round. So, anyways, I hope we never see that again, or I hope if we do, the Grizzlies they benefit again.
Exactly.
Exactly. So, I'll give you the 2 guys that I am the highest on, and that's Jonathan Mogbo from San Francisco and Isaiah Crawford from Louisiana Tech. So they're different, couple small school guys. Start with Mogbo. The big knock on him is he's basically a 6'7" center, but he's got a really long wingspan. He dunked it over 80 times at San Francisco this year. And just for reference, I think Brandon Clark was right around 60 his last year at Gonzaga. So, like, he dunks everything. Crazy high assist percentage. Basically, again, I'm going to do the comparison thing again. For those who haven't watched him, and I get it, you probably don't watch a ton of, you know, San Francisco hoops. It is like if you took Brandon Clark off Gonzaga, put him at San Francisco, and then made him your primary creator. Because they ran him off pick and rolls. He was finding open guys. He was obviously creating for himself. Just supreme athlete, tremendous rebounder. I think he can defend basically 2 through 5. He may struggle with some of the small, quick guards, but really no problem defending, you know, anybody outside of those guys. And another big knock on him is he doesn't really shoot. I think he took like 2 threes all season. So obviously that's not great. And then obviously with Isaiah Crawford, like if you were to ask me what's the closest thing to Vince Williams since Vince Williams, it's Isaiah Crawford at Louisiana Tech. He's got the prototypical wing build plus wingspan, generates a ton of turnovers on defense. He'll create for himself. Good shooter, not a great shooter, probably a similar level shooter to what Vince was coming out of VCU. Like, not great, but certainly enough to make you think that he can do it at a decent clip in the NBA. Again, those are 2 guys that, like, I would take both of them top 20, and I don't even think Isaiah Crawford was in ESPN's latest mock draft. So if he's there, and I think the Grizzlies have 39 and 57, either one of those picks I'd be thrilled with. There's a couple small guards that I find interesting. KJ Simpson from Colorado is one I think that is going to have a chance to be really good. Jamal Shed from Houston, another one who I think has a chance to be really good. I guess I'll throw one last name out there. Jalen Tyson from Cal. Seems like he's starting to get the rightfully first-round buzz. I think I have him 16 on my board. If he's somehow there and in the second round, I would do everything I can to go get him. So any of those five, man, if the Grizzlies can end up with one of them, I think they've got a guy who can at least play a role in the NBA, and they should feel really good about that in the second round.
Yeah. Oh wait, were you finna go, Bryson?
Go ahead, Alex. Yeah, you go ahead.
You know, I was just gonna say, yeah, I'm big on Isaiah Crawford. Another name, I probably would mention. I think it's Cam Christie. I think that's kind of just a big one where, he's kind of like, obviously, like the shooting numbers I saw from him early on, like his numbers and just what he was doing in that context. I would take a swing on him, especially considering like the age and just, and I guess you could say Baylor Shyman's another one, but he's kind of like up and down on the boards. Like he's kind of like, I seen him in 30s, but he could be like late 20s. But Baylor Shyman is another one where I feel like he's another wing. He's 6'6", can shoot the ball, he rebounds well. Feel like he fits a profile. I feel like those are the only names I really know. Like I know a lot of names in the second round, but those are the ones that really stand out to me because just because with the Grizzlies at 39, usually, especially now, like at least recently, they've hit on a lot of second round picks, obviously. So I'm not really too worried about who they take there. I feel like I'm not gonna say I got blind faith as much as I used to, but like I feel pretty good about, like you said, the names that you named. Like they take any of those guys, they'll be good. And I'm really not gonna blink eye, but those are really like those 2 or 3 names that I really like at 39 if they're there.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I did want to give Chip a shout out because he was actually one of the first people I saw, or retweeting stuff about Isaiah Crawford, and now I've seen you and also Rafael Barlow both talk about him being somebody who is definitely underrated. And if you guys don't know, obviously, if you guys don't follow Chip or if you don't follow Rafael Barlow, you might not know that those are like 2 people. Obviously, Chip and him are 2 people that I hold very high in terms of who they're talking about in the draft, just because they, especially Rafael was super high on GG and had him top 10 last year too. So that just to give you kind of, some perspective on what I'm talking about there. So seeing that and then looking at his numbers, looking at his tape, I feel like that's somebody that, I've been looking at mock drafts. They don't even have him on the second round. So that if that's somebody who you get as an undrafted free agent even, or you throw him on a 2-way deal, like that's something I could really see. I could also see them. I know you talked about Shed from Houston, and I think that just watching him and the way that Houston kind of fell apart after he got hurt too, just kind of shows you the type of player that he is and how, they went from the number one, or the team that a lot of people thought was going to win it all, number one team in the country at times this year, and then just the offense was not the same whenever he went out. So I think if that's somebody that you bring in to be kind of like the second or third point guard behind, Josh Smart, and then probably Scottie Pippen Jr. based on what they do with that. So I could see that. But like you said, I don't know if there's going to be another Gigi Jackson. That's kind of unfair. I do like Justin Edwards too, from Kentucky. Even though I feel like he kind of underwhelmed in college, but I feel like that there are some players that their games are more built for the NBA, and I feel like he's one of those guys that could end up being a lot better in the NBA than he was in college. Even though he did struggle at Kentucky, I feel like there was a lot of good players on the team. There's a lot of people that have the ball in their hands. I feel like he didn't always get a chance to show everything that he had, and he had his games, he had his moments. But I feel like in terms of being a good shooter, I feel like the size and everything like that is there. I feel like that's somebody that could be good in the second round. But before we close, Chip, I just wanted to say thank you for joining this week. If you have anything to plug, social media wise, or anything you're working on here, now's the time.
Yeah, definitely give me a follow on Twitter at Chip Williams Jr. I will probably continue spamming your timeline with random queries that I find that make prospects look good and games that I watch. And we'll keep doing that through the draft. And then obviously we got the Summer League coming up too. That's one of my favorite things. So I'll be doing as much Summer League stuff as usual. So one of my favorite times of the year. So yeah, if you're into this kind of stuff, I'd appreciate the follow. chatting, debating, whatever on Twitter. So that's really the main thing.
Yeah, 100%. I always say for me and for people that are like really into the NBA, the off season does not really start until the end of summer league. Just because, the draft is basically, the Celtics just had their parade and the draft is this upcoming week, right?
Yep.
Then you go straight into summer league a couple weeks after that. So I always say that that's really when the off season starts. But like I always say, thank you to everyone who listened to this episode of the Next Gen Podcast here on the Bluff City Media Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Bryson Wright, was joined by Chip Williams Jr. and Alex Winton. And we'll see y'all next week where we can break down everything the Grizzlies actually did in the draft.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Next Gen Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like and a comment wherever you download your podcasts. Head over to www.bluffcitymedia.co, where you will find comprehensive coverage of all things Memphis sports and how you can become an insider. We'll see you back here next time.